Hey, you can get yourself seated, and we are ready to begin. So before we begin, I'll start off with a couple of did you know facts for people. They are here from all over the world. The session is called Built in India for the World. So talking about India. So first fact. Where do you think India stands in terms of, the consumer base or the telephone subscriber base, whether you're talking about fixed and mobile together? Any guesses from the audience? Anyone? Bhuvnesh? No, that's not right. That is correct. So according to the TRAI, which is the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, January 2021 stats, it's almost at approximately 1.2 billion subscribers. Another quick fact. Where do you think the internet broadband subscriber base holds as of June 2021? Any guesses again in terms of ranking?
I think we're far behind. Top five.
Far behind? Okay. Anyone else? Top five is right. Get closer. That's right. It's at approximately 825 million internet broadband subscribers in India. So the reason I started off with that was just to show the length and breadth of where India comes from in terms of demand. And it's a very special economy, it's a very special country because it comes with extremely large demands. When you compare it with ARPUs, when you compare with the supply ecosystem, it's not something which works in the West. So having said that, if many of you who attended Randeep from Airtel's session, I would like to frame it, and one wise person used to tell me, if you're successful in India, it's a guarantee you're successful rest of the world. And that's what we are trying to bring here with this particular session today. So my name is Sandeep Kohli, part of Meta Connectivity Ecosystems in APAC, and I'm here on behalf of Telecom Infra project to talk about and introduce Built in India for the World. So can we move to the session slides, please? So the way we are going to do this, we'll do a very quick intro of what Built in India for the World stands for. We will move into a fireside chat with Spectra, which is an internet service provider from India. We then move into our first supply ecosystem panel, which will be tailoring to RAN, SIs, transport, and talking about software and automation. And when we say for the world, we have a global operator, Vodafone, sitting there to tell us what they feel about software and automation in their networks. From there, we move to a last panel on the supply side, which is open Wi-Fi. And again, the template remains the same, where we talk about the ecosystem, supply ecosystem, as well as the demand sitting with us on the panel. So with that, I'll quickly start off with giving a very quick introduction about what Telecom Infra project delivers. So TIP, as most of you, or I assume all of you know, it's a collaborative ecosystem which brings in the demand-side players like mobile operators, internet service providers. It aggregates that demand and very closely tries to tie that with a very rich supply ecosystem, which gets technology providers, which gets vendors, which gets system integrators, which gets ODMs, OEMs, contract manufacturers. So it's the complete length and breadth of the community coming together. And what TIP is able to achieve by that is it helps in fostering competition. It helps in creating diverse supply chains. It helps in lowering down TCOs with the open and disaggregation. And it helps in building the networks of the future. So with that, TIP is able to deliver specific focus areas, whether you're talking about indoor networks, you are talking about fixed and broadband access, your mobile access, you're talking about future-ready networks, you're talking about distributed architectures. So that's the value that Telecom Infra project has been able to deliver to the entire community, with the community increasing in the number. So with that, coming to the objectives of what Built in India for the World is, it's primarily based on 4 important objectives. First, performance benchmarking. Most of you would know, we've been hearing in the Open RAN sessions or ORAN sessions yesterday how important performance benchmarking is in terms of understanding the network performances, in terms of KPIs, in terms of loads, in terms of capacities. One such example is where TIP helps in delivering blueprints. It helps in delivering badges. We just got the new testing and validation frameworks about gold, bronze, silver badges. So that's where performance and benchmarking is one of the utmost important objectives. The second is software and automation, which we'll, of course, hear from our panel today, and how software and automation is important, and it's going to be the most important for the networks of tomorrow. We will talk about RIC, we will talk about RIA, and we will touch upon other aspects of software and automation across transport, across RAN, and across Wi-Fi. The third and the most important, which you keep hearing, is TCO, or cost competitiveness. So cost competitiveness is achieved by two factors. One, the disaggregation of the hardware vendors, and the cost competition of the hardware vendors is able to bring that competition. But more importantly, the first two objectives, which is performance benchmarking and software and automation, is able to deliver that cost competition. And finally, it is about the local supply enablement. It is about this supply ecosystem that we are bringing in together, and which we'll discuss more in details in the coming panels. So with that, the four objectives sound pretty theoretical, right? How do you apply it in practicality? So what does TIP really do in terms of making sure that these objectives come forward? So the first is about testing and validation of these technologies. That's where the vehicles, or that's where the outputs of blueprints, that's where the outputs of badges, that's where sharing that with the community across deployment scenarios is crucial and is important. And that's one of the heavy lifting that TIP helps in doing in terms of making commercial adoption faster. The second is closely getting domestic and global demand together. Now, this is a point I would like to stress upon. When we are talking about India, that's a large domestic demand. And when we talk about built in India for the world, it would be hollow, right? I mean, if you're talking about built in India for the world, but the domestic demand in India is not really catered to. So that's where you heard Airtel today talking about 10,000 Open RAN sites opportunity. That's what they are working on. They are actively working on open and disaggregated transport solutions, open Wi-Fi. You would hear Spectra today talking about how they've already gone ahead and commercially adopted these solutions. So with that, we are trying to say that this particular forum is ready to take it to the world. Not that it wasn't ready last year, but it's ready now with the proof points that this is commercially adopted in India, and it's catering to the volumes at large. The third and the most important part is local supply enablement, how there is a large volume, there's large manufacturing base, software and automation base. I would like to call out global companies like Mavenir, IP Infusion, EdgeCore. They are now a part of this supply ecosystem in India, making huge bets, making investments, efforts in terms of catering to this large demand which comes from India, and thereby also, in parallel, catering to the demands in the rest of the world. And building awareness is what we are all here doing at Fyuz. So that's how we make the four objectives come together. This is purely the main slide, which shows the end-to-end telco stack. Whether you're talking about radio access, you're talking about Wi-Fi, transport, core, you see all the ecosystem supply partners coming in together. On the left top side, you see how the demand side players, some of which are listed, Airtel, Spectra, CloudXtel, which is an urban NAS provider in India, RailTel, which is one of the largest government players in India, how these demand players are already anchors and they have started to adopt open and disaggregated technologies, and how some of the largest technology providers or vendors or even manufacturers and system integrators are coming in together from India. So with this, I come to my last slide of showcasing that we started Built in India in 2021. Back then, we did it virtually. The idea was we wanted players to come forward, give demand signals. We wanted this ecosystem to be seen by the domestic demand players. We were able to achieve that, and today, it's already been commercially adopted. So that's a tick mark of success. We also wanted to showcase the strengths of this ecosystem, which today has already converted into increased trust and confidence. And last but not the least, we called it Built in India in 2021, and that's the reason we call it Built in India for the World in 2022. So with that, I would like to go on to our first fireside chat session. I would like to invite Udit Mehrotra, CEO and Managing Director of Spectra, a Tier 1 internet service provider in India. Udit, welcome. I think you can be seated here.
Bottle of
Is
water.
your mic on?
Yeah. They don't have.
Hear me?
Are we able
they
to
don't have-
hear
they
everyone?
only have glass.
Okay.
So
So I'm going to ask just one.
just one. Thank you. Thank you.
No? Yeah, now I'm audible. I can hear myself.
So Udit, first of all, thanks a lot for making time and flying on the night of Diwali.
Thank you, Sandeep.
During this session, if some of you see, we try to get some feeling of Diwali here and try to, make our people, who took time out from Diwali to come here and make them feel a little bit at home. So first of all, really, really thankful for your presence here. How are you doing today?
Good. How about you?
Very well, thank you. So Udit, why don't you start briefly about explaining, the audience here, which is from different parts of the world, about what Spectra does and what are your business activities, what is the length and breadth of your networks in India, maybe like a little bit of an icebreaker around that.
Sure. So Spectra is, we are a network as a service provider. We cater to businesses. Our focus is to work with businesses in understanding their business requirement and design, deliver, deploy, manage, own the network solutions to deliver on their business requirements. As part of being a network as a service provider, we also own and operate a large intracity fiber network in 6 metro cities across the country. Though, as a network as a service provider, we provide services across 135 cities in the country today, catering to over 10,000 businesses, and essentially catering to over 100,000 end users, actually way more than 100,000 end users across the country today. We are primarily focused on B2B as a segment where we cater to businesses of all sizes.
Brilliant. So, Udit, I still remember, back in the day, I think it was right when the pandemic started in 2020, and we had this exploratory call about how, disaggregation, openness and disaggregation across transport, and I remember Open Wi-Fi was still was just initiated as a project group back then. So, what changed from then to now? What really drove Spectra to not just explore open and disaggregation in your networks, but going ahead and actually adopting it in a big way? So what were your key drivers, and how has this journey been like for you?
So there's been, so our journey as a network as a service provider started 4 years ago in 2018 timeframe. And as our journey progressed, obviously in 2020, there was a pandemic. But as our journey progressed from 2018 to 2019 and onwards, we had a couple of insights that we'd sort of gotten on the way. One was that while we are in a very price-sensitive market, we are also in a quality-conscious market. What that means is that one size does not fit all. And there are different customers who have different requirements and different price points that they're willing to pay. And it's not that everybody wants grade A service and is willing to pay a grade A price for it. There are all types of customers, essentially, that we end up sort of dealing with. And therefore, while our journey started with large vendors using their equipment for providing managed network services, we quickly enough realized that it's not going to work for us in the long term, simply because the large vendors, they had a certain portfolio of solutions and products, rather, not even solutions, products, and they were geared towards certain price points. We could cater to some of the market in India with at those cost points, but not a large market. And that's where our journey towards looking for different vendors started, and that's when we sort of looked at Open Wi-Fi, and not just Open Wi-Fi, even Open Optical for that matter, but Open Wi-Fi on one side, and the opportunity that we saw with disaggregation, whether it is with Open Wi-Fi or with Open Optical, is the ability that it provides us to fit the solution as per the customer's requirement. So we don't have to use a specific cost point. Now we have multiple cost points that we can work with, essentially enabling us to cater to a much larger market, whether it is somebody who wants a grade A service and is willing to pay a grade A price, or somebody who's okay with a grade B service because they only want to pay that much money for it. And that's been a huge advantage. That has helped us expand our addressable market by a magnitude of 1 or 2, actually. So that's been good. And that's where we've seen a huge advantage of disaggregation.
Right.
Yeah.
So, okay, so, when I mentioned that we started this journey, or we started this discussion during the pandemic brought about a lot of challenges, I mean, especially for people who don't know, India, there were these significant waves, and there were these gaps between the waves where things got fine and then suddenly it changed. So there were a lot of pressures, a lot of challenges that, because of the pandemic came up to service providers like yourselves. So how do you see, or where do you feel that these challenges were improved or solved? I mean, one such challenge was the chipset shortages, right, which to some extent exists today as well. So how do you feel that the disaggregation and the openness of the transport solutions and the Wi-Fi solutions has managed to help you and come out of these challenges? How did that play a role?
So
or what were those challenges other than this?
We saw some pretty interesting challenges during the pandemic. In addition to the supply chain being hampered and unavailability of equipment, etc., and just the delayed long supply times, we also saw large vendors just stopped supplying. There were models that we were using that were just stopped. That were just stopped arbitrarily. We also saw large vendors essentially increasing the price on us, right? And the market that we are sitting in, as it is, it's a price sensitive, cost sensitive market. And suddenly, our vendors were not only just telling us that we will not be able to supply it to you before 6 months, but now it's going to cost you 2x more, to buy the same stuff.
Wow.
Which was obviously, in addition to all the problems, that was even a bigger problem,
Right.
because that had a huge impact on the business case altogether, right? And the way we work is, we work with our customers, businesses over a long period of time, right? Where we've got, contracted price, etc. So we cannot just go back and tell them that, see, our vendors increased the price to 2x, now we need to charge you 2x either. So that's not a possibility. But obviously, beyond that, even if that was a possibility, we didn't want to sort of face such shocks going forward. And that's where we saw disaggregation as a big advantage. The ability to use the same common platform, software platform, so that we don't have to keep repeating integrations, right? While being able to diversify the hardware supply chain was a big advantage. So while on the business scale-up side, it allowed us to cater to a much larger addressable market. It also helped us overcome the problems that we had faced, in terms of supply, in terms of price points, etc. So this is how we were able to overcome the challenges during the pandemic. And obviously, while this started as an opportunity to increase the addressable market, I would say that we got lucky. We started early on, so that when the pandemic happened, we were already on way, right? We had made some headway in terms of open Wi-Fi and so on and so forth, which enabled us to sort of accelerate our efforts and investments. And working with some of the vendors that we did and the TIP community, it became much easier, relatively speaking, easier for us to commercialize open Wi-Fi quickly enough.
Great. So I think connecting the transport solutions, that's where your journey started, and taking it to Wi-Fi. In the middle, and a lot of use cases or user experiences or the way technology or telecom was done in terms of connecting people changed. And now, we talking about the metaverse or talking about the user experiences or use cases relating to the metaverse. There are very different network, requirements that are going to be changing in the coming years. So how do you see, and first of all, what are those network requirements as a ISP? How are you trying to address those? What, according to you, are the main ones? And how do you feel, again, this open and disaggregated ecosystem bringing or playing a role in building the networks of tomorrow?
Okay, so let me begin by sharing that, first of all, with the onset of the pandemic and well, with the pandemic being there or not being there anymore, I don't know. But we've seen some permanent, well, at least as of now, permanent changes in terms of utilization, network utilization, and service utilization. We've seen what used to be a very a business hour utilization of the networks. We've seen that to be a more longer hour utilization of the networks,
Yeah.
etc. And we have seen the utilization itself go up substantially, right? Now, this utilization going up is obviously coming, is being generated by, people working from home, hybrid working. A lot of the companies in India, including us, we still have a very hybrid working environment, which means that a lot of Teams and Zoom and everything else is still being utilized. So that's where we've seen high bandwidth and low latency applications generating a lot of this traffic or a lot of this demand.
Yeah.
And as this demand has grown, we've also had to go back and to be able to cater to this demand, we've had to go and look at upgrading our transport networks to be able to do that. And while we went through the whole exercise of how do we go about expand or growing our transport network capacity, identifying the vendors and so on. So therein also our journey started with looking at the traditional vendors.
Right.
Which started like 1.5 years ago or something like that. We started with looking at the traditional vendors, and then I don't remember exactly how, but we started working with TIP on the open optical opportunity as well. And after we looked at open optical along with the rest of the vendors, and we found it to be both up to the mark in terms of the functionality, the feature set, right? And the total cost of ownership was also much healthier as compared to what we saw with the other vendors.
Right.
And herein again, I would refer to what I said earlier. We are in a market where one size does not fit all.
Right.
Right. So therefore, ability to utilize hardware of different sizes from whichever vendor has it was a big start. It was a big advantage that we saw in
Right.
terms of both a short-term to a long-term advantage.
Yeah.
That we saw. And after having done our POCs, lab trials, etc., we decided to go for open optical.
So before I move on to the next section, it just came to my notice. I'd like to apologize that your designation is incorrectly stated, and you can totally imagine how much hard work has gone behind that. Some sort of goof-ups happen in the last minute, right? So just for the audience, he's the CEO of Spectra, and I apologize for that. I know it's not a big deal. So moving on, I think moving to open Wi-Fi, which has been very exciting. We started this in the beginning of this year. Yeah. And it started off with the main problem of the supply chain issues, right? Yeah. So first of all, how important is Wi-Fi in your networks primarily? And what made you move towards this open and disaggregation of the Wi-Fi ecosystem on its own? And you've gone ahead and primarily made big investments into the open Wi-Fi, particularly with the deployment size that you have. Yeah. So maybe if you could, tell us a little bit about that.
So, I don't know, like 80, 90%, nearly 100% of the utilization today happens on Wi-Fi. So Wi-Fi is very important, whether it is our business customers, actually for all business customers. And, we realized that while businesses were buying connectivity from us, they didn't know how to handle their own Wi-Fi networks. And that's where we've invested heavily over the last 3-4 years in building a managed Wi-Fi service as well as part of our overall network as a solution portfolio. And therefore, Wi-Fi is extremely critical and important, right? Because that's where nearly like 90%, 100% of the utilization now takes place, whether it's in offices or whether it's at home in residential business side of the business. So therefore, given the critical nature of Wi-Fi for us, right, and the Wi-Fi supply chain, and the shocks, if I may say so, that we had faced earlier on, we decided that we wanted to be able to to do whatever required to not have to face those shocks again, whether
Yeah.
it was in terms of supply side or in terms of cost points, etc., and obviously be able to cater to a much larger market. And that's why we accelerated our investments in terms of our effort, time, money, whatever, in getting to a point of commercialization or commercial deployment of open Wi-Fi networks. And today we have over 4,000 APs deployed, catering to tens of thousands of end users, and it seems to be working fine. It seems to be working great. Obviously, we keep working with the community and our vendors to adding more functionality, whether it's in terms of analytics or identifying bugs and fixing those, etc. We realize that it's a journey. It's not something that has been cooked and baked for a decade. It's something that is now getting done. But we are happy with what we've seen, and we are very confident that as more and more service providers pick it up, there'll be more enhancements that'll get contributed back to the community, and we'll also be a beneficiary of that.
Perfect, thanks. So just for some of the ecosystem partners and the ecosystem players sitting here, you've already deployed about 4,000 access points on open Wi-Fi. What is your sort of demand signal or projection for the next 6 months or 1 year? How does that look like out of your total opportunity size?
So our estimate would be anywhere, in the next 12 months, we are looking at anywhere between 15 to 20,000 more access points being deployed, and maybe even more. But that's essentially what we are looking at right now.
And how much of that do you think would be open Wi-Fi?
Going forward, primarily, most of our deployments, well, nearly all of our deployments will be open Wi-Fi.
Brilliant.
Because that's where we are. We are not just putting our effort in terms of having 10% or 20% of our overall deployment being open Wi-Fi deployment,
Right.
but essentially 80-90% of our incremental deployment being open Wi-Fi.
Brilliant. So that brings me to the last question, right, about the Built in India for the World ecosystem. So on the open Wi-Fi front, you primarily started with some of the Indian providers. On the open optical front, I just mentioned that players like EdgeCore and IP Infusion, they are the ones who are coming from a global scenario to an Indian scenario. So how has this experience of this supply ecosystem been for you? And what is your confidence level about that ecosystem, which is the voice that we're trying to deliver here?
So our experience has been good. It has taken us some time to get to a minimum level of required confidence, and that's also the reason why it has taken us some time, to do the POCs and the lab tests and field trials and so on and so forth. But both in terms of working relationships within the ecosystem, within the supply side ecosystems, both technically and commercially, we are fairly confident today, and we only see the ecosystem growing,
Right.
And maturing further faster. I also think that as within India, whether it is Spectra or other service providers, pick up and deploy more of the open Wi-Fi or open optical stuff, the more it gets done, the faster we will see the supply side ecosystem mature, become better, faster, and so on. So I think our confidence can only increase from here on and not decrease.
All right, so that brings us to the end of this session. Udit, thank you so much for your inputs and your learnings and insights. And we look forward to the fact that this ecosystem continues to bring more and more value to you and your networks. Thanks a lot for joining us.
We're also hoping for the same. Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
So with that, I would like to call our next moderator for the supply ecosystem panel, Sriram. Sriram Subramanian joins us also from Meta. Sri, thanks a lot for curating this, and over to you. Look forward to this panel. Take care.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. So this indeed is a special session because we talk about built in India, smelling Indian food for 45 minutes. And we get to eat it. The conference has got a theme of food and technology, that marriage between the two. And this is where we brought food to the breakout session. So kudos to folks who made it happen. and the theme of this. So I was at the Indian Mobile Congress a few weeks back, and what was amazing is that India was always catching up in terms of technology. When 3G was deployed, it took a year and a half for India to be up on 3G. 4G, it took 2.5 years between the time 4G was ready in the rest of the world and India deployed 4G. With 5G, it was about 7 to 8 months between when it was deployed globally versus when it got deployed in India. So certainly you see that technology has been catching up at a faster pace, and definitely when we look at technologies such as Open RAN, Europe and operators like Vodafone have been pushing on the gas pedal pretty hard in trying to do the lab trials and field trials and prove out the technology at a much faster pace. So we got a theme for the session with the equation between demand and supply. Right? Demand, certainly the CSPs are driving Open RAN as a technology, disaggregated technologies, and all the software and automation around it to ensure that the rest of the ecosystem, the supply, is trying to address the challenges that is placed by demand or the CSPs. So we got a very elite panel today. Let me call upon the first panelist, Paco Francisco Martin from Vodafone, who will be addressing the demand part of the equation. So on the supply side, let me call upon Mavenir Sridhar Rajagopal, who's the SVP of Technology at Mavenir. Followed by TechM, Head of Service Delivery and Innovation at TechM, Vivek Tiwari. Capgemini, VP of Digital System Integration, Mohan Aravimundan. From IP Infusion, Tom Sawai, Chief Sales Officer. And finally, Ranga Swami from HCL. Have enough chairs. All right, so to kick it off, and now that we're talking about demand and supply, I'd like to start with Paco. How do you see software automation being a requirement in the area of Open RAN, RIC, and backhaul? Like, what role do you see automation can play in all the different areas of disaggregated technologies?
Yeah. Well, thank you. First of all, thank you for having me here today. It's been a great event so far. I think one of the highlights of the event is the quality of the food. I mean, I think this is setting a standard for events in the future. So can you imagine a Mobile World Congress? It takes over an hour to queue for one sandwich. That it looks very bad. And here the food is really different. And I have to say, Indian food is amazing. So probably the best so far. So thank you. Thank you for that. Automation is it's very important. I mean, we are doing Open RAN for a reason. We don't want to repeat the same. So there must be an advantage. And automation is one of the areas where we are putting a lot of focus to try and find out how can we improve the overall TCO and how can we enable more innovation. I have to say that it's still early days. I have to say that maybe there's a bit of a wrong setting of expectations. We are seeing out there announcements about the amazing impact of the automation that you can get. I mean, we need to be cautious about that. We still don't know, and honestly, from our side, we still don't see those huge benefits, but they could be there. There are certainly areas like AI or ML that can give us that extra. Yeah, we need to really see the impact. But automation is one of the parts of Open RAN that will potentially add a lot of value, and it will play a key role.
Excellent. So definitely when we look at, I mean, one key message there is it's still early days for automation. So it is one of the challenges that need to be addressed, and to get to like the stability point of like what's needed, and the rest of the ecosystem need to pick up on it. So turning it over to Mavenir, Mavenir is one of the leading OEMs on all disaggregated technologies, particularly Open RAN. So how do you see the automation challenge being addressed from a Mavenir standpoint?
Okay. So again, thank you for inviting Mavenir for the panel. So on the automation front, I think, as Paco was also pointing out, I mean, there are different aspects of automation that we have to address when we talk about automation. In our view, there are, if I were to categorize, maybe 3 different places where automation plays a role. I think the first one is on the testing side. I mean, with Open RAN now, it's a unsynchronized system, that's what I would like to say, because there's a radio vendor, he will have his own cycle of giving you new radios, new software updates, and things like that. Then as a software provider, we would have our own, the platform providers would have their own cycles, and if it's not a single vendor who's coordinating all this, and you have to live with that, because if you want to really scale and have multiple. So if you really want to succeed here, and if you want to have good regression cycles, good test cycles, where you're able to validate everything end to end, you need to have that automation framework where as new things come into play, a new software gets released from any single source, everything can still be integrated, validated. So I think that part is very important from a test perspective. Then the second part that comes is on the performance part, like with the RIC and everything else. I think as we were discussing, I mean, if there are parameters that need to be tuned, the load changes in the network, there are some, suddenly you see some interference, you have to do some side goes down, there are some faults you have to look into and correct for those. You want to automate, you want to figure out how to optimize the logging. I mean, all that requires some automation as part of the performance tuning of the network and making sure you're healthy. And again, this is the next level of innovation that is happening in that space. And I think the third level, I would say, is on the deployment side. I think as we are doing this disaggregated deployments, for example, you may have sites coming up where the whole system is not ready yet. So how do you test and validate those sites? How do you push your software updates? How do you make sure that as software gets rolled out, everything goes through a CI/CD pipeline, and you have a chain of steps that you execute in the model to kind of making sure that this whole deployment gets done in an automated manner with zero touch, or however you want to call it. But I think there are these multiple aspects, and I think there are tools involved, there are people involved. I think there is different players involved. So how do you make this happen? I think those are the things that we have been working to address with our partners. And again, here, I think partnership, making sure that you have the right tools, right sets, I think is going to be super critical.
Thank you. So now, flipping to the system integration side, you could also argue that system integration is kind of sandwiched between demand and supply, because you got to address the requirements from the demand side, and you also need to deliver the services, the key component of the integration. So how do you see that particular challenge of like the supply-demand equilibrium being addressed from an SI perspective, starting with Vivek from TechM?
Thanks, Sri, and good afternoon, everyone. Let me give it a slightly different perspective. If you talk to an operator, you get a version that everyone is individually good. Every component of the ORAN open system is good at its own place. Then you talk to the software vendors, the hardware vendors, chip vendors. They're all in their place. Now, the operator's problem is that there are two kinds. Unlike 4G, 5G operators are relatively cautious in really investing money. 4G, it was a question of survival. You had no data versus data. Now you have data versus value-added services. So they are not very, operator community is not readily available to really pump in a lot of money, except those greenfield operators who are greenfield, they have to choose between O-RAN or legacy. But those operators who are brownfield, they need a lot of confidence, they need a lot of skin in the game from all the ecosystem partners, be it software vendors, hardware vendors, system integrator. Everyone has to put his skin in the game. And two of the major operators who have really adopted O-RAN, look at their contracts, look at their relationship with the stakeholders. Everyone has put skin in the game. So I was talking to one of the American, O-RAN operator, and he said, who does cross-pollination of lessons learned? Let us say vendor A or hardware supplier or a software vendor, there is something learned in the process. Who takes to the competitor? That was the question asked. Second thing, every player in the ecosystem talks about themselves. Who talks about operator? These two are very deep questions. So that is where, tip kind of ecosystem where all the partners come to a single stage, a lot of interop, let us say 10, if you take CU, DU, hardware, chip, all the ecosystem, n into n plus minus 1 divided by 2 is the total communication. In order to break that, we need to have a common partner ecosystem. We have to have a common lab where each stakeholder does interop with everyone else. Second discussion with the operator that I had is, I want to flip any component in the ecosystem. A single component is delaying my rollout. I want to bring in another one, get going without getting blocked or waiting for the cycle that Sridhar talked. There are mismatch cycle. Now you may not kick out the component forever, but at least you may want to put it on the non-critical path and go forward. In that case, there is a need to bring everyone on a single stage like tape, or maybe we at Tech Mahindra have exchange, we call it 5G exchange, where we bring in all the partners. I mean, we are friends of all. So we do a lot of interop, we do a lot of testing, and we pass on the information to each one securely for their cross-pollination. That's my view. If we want O-RAN system to really go into the market in a matured way, we have to accelerate the pace of innovation. That means innovation done in one place has to be learned by the another guy. Thank you, Sri.
Got it. So now, moving on to Capgemini and Mohan, what is your perspective on that supply-demand equilibrium?
See, traditionally, if you look at SIs as the way that we used to do business, we would always stand behind the vendors in a way, right? That was basically, it was all monolithic. In a way, we would go and supply the talent and the abilities and the technology behind it. What disaggregation has done, and it started with the core, now it has come to the RAN, and RAM, it's even more complex, is the fact that there is a readjustment that the SIs are now doing because they are becoming more and more solution houses, because it's no longer about saying, oh, it's not mine, let the large NEPs handle it. So for us in Capgemini, when this has come, this has caused, there is a supply, there's a demand, huge demand, and the demand is totally different from what the demand used to be. The demand used to be like, oh, you need X number of people, so X number of technology abilities and come in. Now it's about reinventing ourselves or re-transforming ourselves, because now you're playing a role of putting everything together. So effectively for us, it has been like looking at how you're pulling an ecosystem together, which is it's a big word, but bringing and orchestrating all of it together needs a lot of investments, which is what we do in terms of labs, in terms of partnerships, investing in partners, putting skin in the game. That's one part of it, which is huge. And then that is done, but if you have to go to mass scale, for us, it has also been building the talent, which is kind of different from the way we used to look at it. So that's another huge part of it. So that's being done. So effectively, for us, if you look at it, it's a transformational challenge. It's not only about technology transforming, it's also about how you going to supply in terms of, we have some assets, but we depend on partners for the bigger assets to come in. So that's one part of it. The third most important is, this ecosystem has created an issue, or let me call it a challenge, where you have to be sure that the TCO is not going to get blown out of proportions, because effectively, a monolithic structure has a better kind of a way to structure the TCO. For us, it's like, since it's much more flexible, it's better, you will get the benefits of it down the line. That's what we are all here for, saying OpEx is going to go down by 30%, which is wonderful, but if you have to make that, there is a certain level of investment that goes in, so the initial TCOs are going to be high. or has to be managed. So everybody has to have a skin in the game. So we look at it from all the three angles, where it's a technology play of combining things together, where we're looking at how we're going to satisfy the demand with a different type of way we address in terms of talents and assets and so on and so forth. And then also looking at it and saying, from a business-wise, we do the both, and we don't overblow the TCO, because in the end of the day, operators are not going to implement it. If it's going to be like, oh, I can do the traditional stuff much cheaper, greenfield, yes, brownfield, no. And I think that these are the three main things for us. In a way, from an SI perspective, that readjustment is what we are going in, and Capgemini is investing heavily. And India is the biggest base for us, and kind of changing and majority implementations in India to supply to the world. And that's how we look at it.
Absolutely. I mean, you touched on one interesting point about TCO, but I'll circle back to that in a little bit. So IP Infusion, Tom, has been a big player on backhaul and transport. What does automation mean to you from a backhaul and a transport perspective?
I mean, clearly it's important for us to work in that ecosystem and allow the automation that's coming to be to pass through on the transport side. And we've been doing work with Open RAN in terms of interoperability all around the world to demonstrate that that exists. And I think that's proved out at this point in time. Certainly there are various pockets within the network where there's disaggregation taking place, and where IP Infusion is really focused today tends to be on the data center, the edge of the provider network, as well as at the cell site. And in fact, last time we were all together in 2019, the big news, at least for us, was around DCSG and a real focus on cell site. And that's evolved so much that today, our fastest growing part of our network is on the provider edge. And really, that's not an area that gets a ton of attention and gets a lot of discussion, but it's very fast growing, and I don't know that it gets a lot of press, let's say. But there's a significant advantage that we're offering there. If I can use the word automation in a slightly different way, how do we make this more simple? So IP Infusion's been around for a long time, over 20 years now, and we've been disaggregated from the start. We're a software company through and through. And this opportunity for us, this evolution in the marketplace, this inflection, has given us the opportunity to bring more advanced solutions, more complete solutions to the carrier world. For the last 20 years, we've been supplying a lot of the traditional networking names with source code for control plane and helping them build their products, get to market faster at lower cost, which ultimately had value for the service providers. And we still do that. It's a thriving part of our business. On the other hand, we're now bringing more complete network operating system solutions directly to the operators. And when we talk about built in India, IP Infusion is. We are exactly that. For the last 10 years or more, we've been architecting and engineering our solutions in India. So we're by definition right there. The challenges that we see in the Indian marketplace on transport are a bit unique in the sense that they're the same challenges that we see all over the globe when we're selling, but they're supersized. So when you look at the challenges around TCO, as we discussed earlier, and certainly we heard on the main stage, enormous pressure on ARPU, and our ability to deliver solutions that are going to be low enough total cost of ownership that it allows for rollout that wouldn't otherwise be possible with the traditional way of building networks. One of the ways that we support that, in addition to be very cost effective from the software side, is by having a robust ecosystem. So today, I think in terms of off-the-shelf white boxes from ODMs, we probably have the largest ecosystem that's available anywhere today. And I know that that's been the value. We even heard from Udit earlier today about the importance of that large ecosystem, so that you can size right, you can put in the right product. And it also leads to the second challenge we see specifically in India, and it's just around scale. All of us in this room are well aware of the challenges that we've seen around hardware availability based on component shortages and what have you. And when you're deploying networks with 200,000, 300,000, or 400,000 endpoints, it's a real challenge. So what IP Infusion has done is really built a platform-based approach. That platform base solves problems in a number of different use cases, but it also works across multiple ODMs, various size boxes from those ODMs, and as we announced last week, and I think our CEO was speaking about today from the main stage, we're going to increase the ecosystem size on the switching ASIC, which has largely been focused on single vendor, and now we'll go to multiple vendors, which we believe will allow us to decrease the price even more and provide even more options for these networks that just have to scale so vastly, right? If you are not able to get the supply chain to deliver with one product, maybe you try another, your software platform stays the same. It's the same integration experience. It's the same management experience, same pass-through.
Excellent. So now the same question for Ranga from an HCL standpoint. How do you see transport and backhaul and where like an HCL, like an SI like HCL can play there in the backhaul and transport? Since we've been talking to Tom about transport and automation, like how do you see that from an SI perspective?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for having me here. So, as my fellow panelists echoed, when you look at automation, you look at it holistically, right? Across all the domains, RAN, transport, and core, and across all network phases as well, as Sridhar alluded to, starting from network integration in the lab, deployment, and operations. So we're talking about a matrix here. One is the cross-layer, cross-domain. The other one is across phases, cross-phase automation. So in all this, there is a need to have an overarching layer that can correlate events, telemetry from different domains to identify the root cause of the issue and improve the customer experience. So from that perspective, RAN has been the last frontier to conquer. We have seen interesting sessions yesterday on how RIC will enable that, how say RIC has evolved from SON that has not addressed the majority of the issues. From transport perspective, I would like to add to what Tom said. Generally, when you look at telemetry, right, we tend to look at RAN KPIs and core KPIs. And generally, this transport KPIs, the way we can correlate data using deep packet inspection from transport domain, are added after the fact, and just based on my experience. With this disaggregated network architecture, there is a need to have that holistic overarching service assurance layer for operations and overarching CI/CD CT layer for lab right in the beginning, including transport. We have, as HCL, invested in zero-touch automation solutions that use data lake as the base concept and use AI/ML for automating various use cases. We have acquired some products in data segment, and very happy to say that for some of our operators, we were able to say kind of improve the customer experience by correlating data from transport domain with the RAN issues that they're seeing and also with the core issues that they're seeing. And this again has to be across layers within transport also. So transport is disaggregated, as rightly said, and you have a hardware layer, virtualization layer, and you have network functions. Again, going back to the legacy transport, you used to get telemetry from the EMS systems, but you need to get this telemetry from various layers within transport domain as well. So in a nutshell, there is a need to have a cross-layer automation solution for transport domain, and you correlate that across domains from RAN and core transport. That would be the approach.
Excellent. So I guess one key consideration that came out, or the elephant in the room, as I would call it, is the total cost of ownership, or the TCO consideration. Because when you have a disaggregated ecosystem, you do have an integration element of complexity that is being added. That is very clear from all the panelists like messaging here. So Paco, turning it back to you, what is your expectation from a TCO standpoint as this integration happens with all the automation?
So at the very minimum, we think that automation is to be able to help us on the extra cost that you have after you disaggregated everything. We disaggregated everything, now we need to aggregate again. So automation will have to help us on that front. The way we do it is important. I think there is the opportunity, as we've been saying, or do it multi-domain for the first time, so that's an extra, is an opportunity. But in the areas, for example, of testing, is very important because It used to be done from single place in the past. Now multiple elements, multiple releases, with the ambition to do it in a continuous base as well. So that is an extra challenge. Also, the overall space of automation is still moving and not fully clear, but if you start looking at the different pieces, it gets very complex because you have obviously all the radio part with all the rig and the different applications on top, each of one being implemented as an evolution of SON. You also have all the cloud part that is kind of new in this space. It was also already there in the core in the past, but you have the bare metal automation, you have the CAS, you have the CTCD part, AI, ML on top. So if you start looking at the full thing, automation can mean something in 8 or 9 different places. So it's from the ecosystem point of view, from the supplier point of view, it's not the same that we have finally an approach where it's only one company, for example, doing everything. This is some of the companies in the ecosystem are positioning themselves in that way. Or you go and choose and pick one per area, right? Then you may end up, if you are an operator, with 7 different companies, one for each one of the areas I've been mentioning before. And that will be complexity, and that will have an impact on the cost. So I think automation will help us. I think it's not going to be an amazing improvement, but there are opportunities across domain. And it's very important how we do it, and because the more companies we have, more suppliers we have, it will be worse overall.
So I guess to summarize, how the automation is done is a critical part that will factor into the TCO. That's the key message I'm hearing. Now, if we flip to the supply side of, I guess, from an OEM standpoint, Sridhar, like, how do you see these TCO considerations playing in as well? I mean, is there a view of like trying to make sure that TCO is optimized so that the expectations from operators like Vodafone would be met on the TCO?
Sure. So I think, I don't know if some of you attended my colleague John Baker's talk yesterday, where he was talking about pineapples and then Costco and how all this chip kind of cost and pricing occurs. But I think one of the themes that I think he was talking about is that the fact that smaller vendors, I mean, they get somehow difference in terms of pricing, because it's also a volume game, and especially if you're going for a country like India, where we are going to deploy in a very large scale for so many customers and so many and such a large population, where the intersite distances are also going to be much smaller. So I think the TCOs are definitely very important to optimize. So I think there are a couple of ways that where we have been focusing on in terms of optimizing TCO. I mean, one thing is, if you look at the whole Open RAN ecosystem, I mean, we are seeing, although we are seeing a lot of different vendors, and I think you were talking about, n to n minus 1 by 2 kind of connections, and getting all these permutation combinations also going. But I think what is really needed, like I think this was also discussed yesterday, like as has been done in Europe, where a bunch of operators have come together, come up with a list of requirements, harmonizing them. So that gives a fewer amount of maybe harmonized specs where the components get developed. I mean, that can be broadly rolled out to a wider range of customers. So that definitely helps from an ecosystem perspective. Of course, every operator will have their own unique requirements as well, but if 90% of it can be harmonized in terms, I mean, everybody wants the lowest latency and highest throughput and everything else, but if 90% of it could be harmonized, and then you really want like a factory pipeline where, it's like a cookie cutter. I mean, you put these things together, it's like assembly line, it keeps on coming out. I think that's the only way it's going to scale and grow. I think that's number one. I think the other part is, if you look at it from, again, all the automation and other things that are coming where you can deploy, I mean, that was on the CapEx side, but if you look at it from an OpEx perspective, I mean, you really want to look at things like how we are able to deploy faster. Things were taking days earlier with a more software-centric approach and looking at how things are evolving where, for example, if you look at Netflix, I mean, you have videos coming out every day. I mean, you should be able to do updates very quickly in a matter of hours. You want to bring up sites rapidly, and I think that's where I think a lot of cost savings can occur, not just on the CapEx, but also on the OpEx side. And now with all the energy-related aspects coming into play, where you really want to optimize the energy efficiency, that is also becoming very, very important, and definitely in a country like India, where you have to be very careful. You may not be able to have backup power supplies at all sites and things like that. And so I think being efficient there, and I think that's where the Open RAN Alliance has been focusing certain work groups on starting that kind of activity. So I think all this is going to help with the TCO equations, and I think by enabling a whole bunch of players to contribute on their specialties, and I think I was also talking about this yesterday, where the new entrants who are coming into this ecosystem, I mean, by doing just a 10% maybe additional work to make it a telco-grade product, for example, if you take a server, by maybe putting PTP or making it NEBS compliant, or making it a 1U which can go at a cell site in a proper manner. I mean, by making a minor adjustments, you're able to increase your total addressable market at the same time, reducing the cost to a certain manner where you don't have to develop dedicated products. I think that all these things, I think, help the TCO, and I think that's what we have been working with our partners to make this happen.
Great. So if we think about TCO and the system integration, like there's also this theory that system integrators are going to be the single neck to choke, right? All ends have to meet for that TCO metrics to be brought in within the optimization parameters that we're talking about. So Vivek, from your perspective on TechM, how do you look at TCO being optimized to ensure that requirements with folks like Paco would place from an operator standpoint are being met?
So first, I would agree with Sridhar, harmonization of requirement from the operator community, and just to add and complement.
I think you need to put your mic.
Sorry, can you hear me now? Okay, so
Yes.
First I would like to add to what Sridhar said. Harmonization of requirements from operators, that reduces some amount of cost. If we add harmonizing the supply ecosystem as a whole, so their cost of automation or cost of testing or any cost that can be spread across n number of vendors or stakeholders in the ecosystem, that also reduces the cost. And more important than that, if we accelerate the pace of innovation, that gives you huge cost reduction of the ecosystem as a whole. So how to cut the time of innovation or time of maturity, time of hardening the ecosystem is the point. So 3 points altogether, right? So hardening, again, hyper collaboration is the way to go. That's what I would say.
Okay, great. So Mohan from Capgemini, again, same question.
Yeah, so when it comes to a system integrator, the single neck to choke, it's the term that's generally used, and especially for disaggregation as we go into ORAN, everybody expects a system integrator to be the one who takes responsibility for single neck to choke. I mean, for me, the single neck to choke is not, doesn't mean a business structure which is different. You have to have a different business model. If we go the traditional methodology of one taking all of it and then it's margin stacking, in the end of the day, this becomes like a bloated. So operators and system integrators have to kind of look at ways where the responsibility of putting things together and implementing comes from a system integrator, because in the end of the day, that is important. But then there are different business models where we can make it in a way that we are not stacking things up. That's one thing. Now, traditionally, what that would happen is in a traditional environment in the past, it would be like, oh, you deal with the vendors, I'm going to deal with the system integrators. No. In this disintegrated, that's what I say, what system integrators are changing, or what Capgemini is changing, is saying, I'll be the single neck to choke, and what I'm going to implement with my partners, where partnerships is a blueprint, is methodologies, it's processes and implementation, which is completely standardized, harmonized in a way. So that for us, it's like what we are going to go in and put for an operator is not different, it's not alien. So I don't have to go up and start looking at saying, let me buffer up and do stuff like that. Because these are things that in a practical essence that comes into play, right? So for us, when we look at an end-to-end, and Capgemini has been a system integrator for a long time. We have done OT/IT, now we are doing NT. So for us, it's the same model of OT/IT and how we do it efficiently over there. We're bringing in the NT components into it. So we look at it from a holistic perspective, but that doesn't mean we're going to be a single neck to choke for implementation, for responsibility, for making it all work, but it cannot mean that it's the same business model where we can all put everything together and I'm the single neck to choke for. Because there are questions about how, in the end of the day, what does the operator look for? Something that efficiently works. And if I'm comfortable with my partners, the business models can be different. Another one which is very interesting is the TCO question. In the traditional enterprises world, in the traditional telco world, we look at perpetual licenses and so on and so forth. Now the model is shifting because a lot of them are looking at, will this work? Is it going to be subscription-based? Is it going to be pay-per-use based? How is that? Now, how much of that adoption is being done by the vendors is also critical because that's how the initial hump over the initial big investment we have to do will be taken over. I think these are some of the things that needs to be addressed, and it all starts from the fact that how we transform, how we put things together, how we test, how we validate, how we put a blueprint, which is complete. And automation is very important for us because as a system integrator, if we were to do things in X, Open RAN and disaggregated networks bring it X by 5 because there's so many other components, right? So for us, we look at it and say automation is critical because I need to use the same amount of resources to kind of implement something which is now blown over 3 times. So for us, automation, testing implementation is critical for us to go and say, hey, this can be cheaper and how this can be implemented. So that's how we look at it from Capgemini.
Got it. So turning over to the backhaul and transport, Tom, I'm going to challenge this a little bit and say TCO is not such a big factor from a backhaul and transport. But again, it is intended to be phrased that way only because I'll let you keep me honest on that. What are your thoughts on TCO?
I would say that, is the mic on? Okay, there we go. I would say that TCO is a challenge. I would say that in particular elements of the network, the expectation around what DCSG, for example, would deliver in terms of total cost of ownership has been more difficult to realize than had been expected early on. And we can kind of use that as a use case to talk a little bit about it. I think one of the things, when I came into IP Infusion, it's my second time here, but when I came back in, we were looking specifically at the cell site router space, and it would have appeared that we would have been bringing solutions to the marketplace at a fifth or a fourth of what the traditional vendors were providing. In quick order, those price points from the traditional providers shrank down, became a bit more competitive. Apologize. So a couple of months ago, I was meeting with a CEO of a tier 1 provider, and we were talking about DCSG, and he said, I'm really not interested. I'm getting amazing pricing on my cell site router from a traditional vendor, very well-known one. And he said, I don't think you can touch it. And I looked at it, and I said, okay, you were right. You're getting a fantastic deal right there. Maybe we'll look at some other network elements. But just today at this show, I had a meeting with him again, and he said, you know what, Tom? He said, the CapEx savings are fantastic on my existing solution. He goes, but on OpEx, I'm getting slaughtered. He says, it doesn't appear that the price points have really come down. It just moved the cost towards OpEx. And there's a lot of things that one can do to manipulate what might appear to be a lower TCO. But one of the things we've done as IP Infusion is with this platform approach, all of the functionality that we have in our network operating system is available when you buy the platform. If you want to have an advanced routing feature, you want to add SR-v6 or segment routing, these are not advanced packages. You buy the NOS, you get everything we have. And so it makes it very easy to evolve your network and to grow. And I think that that makes a difference in the end in the total cost of ownership. Another example that I can give there is just around companies that are disabling ports. So it's another way to get a very low entry point. But for example, in India, we know that there are enormous scale requirements. And as we build out these new networks, they will grow rapidly. And if you have to incrementally pay more CapEx to turn on 100 gig ports, your TCO savings that you might have expected reduces really rapidly. So when we put solutions out there today in a disaggregated approach, all the ports are live. There's none of these games. So it's all there, and every operator is able to scale at no additional cost as the demand becomes available. We think that's really significant as well. Another thing that we're doing around TCO to try to make the promise of this TCO savings real is that the operators are saying to us, we love disaggregation. We're bought into that concept. We like the flexibility. We understand putting a best-of-breed solution in every network element where we can. But we don't want to do things that are more complex than what they used to be in the old world. I still want to be able to procure a solution, and I guess in our space that's really a box, a switcher router with network operating system and maintenance and support, and I would like to be able to get that with one price point. Yeah? And I would like, when it shows up, I'd like it to show up the old way. When I open up the carton, I'd like there to be a piece of hardware with the software already installed. It's ready to go. And the last thing that they say to me is that, when I have trouble, it's a single throat to choke, right? I would like to be able to call one person, regardless of whether I have a challenge on my hardware, my software. In many cases, I don't even know. I just want help. And so we are delivering that as IP Infusion directly today. Now, I know that as time goes on, we will have to work more with the SIs, but I would say at the immature state of the disaggregation space, we have to do this ourselves, and we are today. Eventually, there's no doubt in my mind that the SIs will be doing much of this type of work for us. Yeah. But today, in order for us to move forward in networks of all sizes, a lot of our business is done in Tier 2 and Tier 3 ISPs, for example, we have to be able to deliver that. Yeah. And the last point I'll make on total cost of ownership goes back to built in India. So for various reasons, India's really driving hard on made in India. There are a lot of financial considerations involved with building in India. And I talked about the fact that we do our software development in India, but we're working together with partners who will build hardware in India as well. So, so we think this makes a real bit of difference. I mean, there are many savings there, and it allows us to, with our partners, compete even better on whether it's a public tender or private tender, whatever. We're going to market in a number of different ways. So, we have a sales team that sells directly to the operators and ISPs all across India, who we bring that value directly because we need to do it. No one understands the value of IP Infusion software platform better than us, so we go out and we actually do that. But we work together, in some cases, with network equipment manufacturers that are based in India, that build in India, and they're well-known brands and entities. It's the same software package. It's the same platform that you might buy installed on a white box as you might get installed on a brand from an OEM based in India. So it goes back to this platform approach. And regardless of whether you buy from that company or perhaps from one of the well-known ODM brands, you're getting the very same experience. It's the same management. It's all the same. So it just gives you a lot of flexibility that was the promise of disaggregation, and that's there now. I think the last thing I'll say about TCO is that with some of the largest operators in India, they've said to us, we've had success with different use cases building our own hardware. IP Infusion, can you do that? And the answer is yes. So we, for the last 20 years, have been doing software for large NEMs, and we can do that on a turnkey basis. So if a large operator comes to us and says, we've built a platform that meets our needs for scale, perhaps it's got some changes to help us achieve our price point objectives. If they give that to us, we can port the network operating system on top of it. We do that as a turnkey and give it back to them. and they just pay over time on a license basis as they use that. So a lot of flexibility there that takes advantage of some of the benefits that are involved in the Made in India incentives.
Excellent. Thanks, Tom. So, from an HCL standpoint, how do you evaluate TCO?
Yeah, absolutely. So, just going back to the base question, right? If the baseline, the cost baseline, is based on the closed system, not non-disaggregated systems, is disaggregated systems, disaggregated architecture is going to increase the TCO? That's the main question that operators are grappling with. When we had this initial conversation, one of the tier 1 operators in the US, we embarked upon a journey to create a business case for creating a white box for OLT, right, and integrating it in the network compared to getting a closed white box from a vendor. So as an SI, our answer has been that with disaggregated architecture and system, TCO will be lower, and primarily because of 3 reasons. One is operators get to choose the best of the breed. There is no vendor lock-in, absolutely. And the supply chain increases because of there is no vendor lock-in. Today, as you all know, there are n number of radio vendors that were not existent earlier. So they came into the marketplace, and that has improved operators' ability to procure lower cost and highly technically superior products. That is one. The second one is collaboration between these vendors amongst the community, enabled by organizations such as TIP. That lowers the cost of system integration. That actually is a main cost item in the overall BOM. If you look at it, okay, I'm getting NOS from somebody, hardware from somebody, and integrating those two, will it increase my cost? You know, instead of paying a vendor, am I paying it to an SI? Right? That's the question. So that we believe is not a challenge. That's where 3 SIs on the panel can help. So absolutely, and that can be done using TIP. And also creating what we call the pre-integration lab infrastructure. HCL has been investing significantly. There are labs across US and India and Europe. We created a business case. We were able to prove it. The third one, last item, in fact, the topic of this panel is automation. It is what we call hyper-automation, not just automation. Across, as I said, all phases of network lifecycle, starting from integration, deployment to operations, across the domains and across the layers. So it's in the beginning I said 2-dimensional. At the end of the panel, I would say 3-dimensional matrix for automation. So these 3 factors will enable operators to lower the TCO, and we believe SIs can play a significant role in that.
Yeah. Okay. So we're a little bit short on time. So as a summary, what I would like each panelist to do is to really talk about, like very briefly, RAN intelligent controller and scale using automation to really keep it brief in the interest of time, given like we got like more panels waiting right after this. So starting with Paco, how do you see Rick and of course scale using software automation?
We think RIC is an evolution for SON, and it will be key for expanding the benefits of SON in radio, including now further levels of disaggregation, for example, attacking the chip directly. So it's a great opportunity, and we need to grab it.
Excellent. Sridhar?
I'll just mention, so of course, we have been working on the RIC platform from Avnet side also, and coming back to the Made in India theme, I think, so we have been working with Airtel on some of the plug fests that were held the last 2 years, both the non-real-time RIC and the near real-time RIC, and we have been providing things like network intelligence as a service with reinforcement learning algorithms that we have put for certain use cases that we discussed with Airtel on. And then we have been seeing performance improvements over a traditional kind of SON, more than, we saw, I think, for the cell-led scenario, more than 20% gains. And and when we tested handovers, I think we were reducing the amount of handovers by more than 50%. So I really see this becoming very important as you put all these learning techniques in there. I mean, it's quite novel, and I think there are a lot more improvements that are to become and explored here.
Excellent. So if we can have a brief one-liner from all of you, that'll be great about the same topic.
So I'll keep it very brief and cryptic, if you will. See, we have to be careful as an ecosystem partner here. It should not,
Microphone.
the RIC should not become another EMS, which needs another layer of, NMS and further layer. If you change one component of the network, it goes the ripple effect all the way. It has to be versatile in the sense it has to interop and ensure that we do not get stuck with another EMS.
Correct.
Got it.
Yeah, for me, very, very short, RIC is a great concept and a great thing that has to come in. But done right, two things it will open up, I think. First is the operational excellence it will bring in, which is what the TCO should address. The second one, I think, is if the use cases are correct, it will also give the operators chance to have much better monetization methodologies through some of the RApps and XApps. So I think it's critical, but I think it has to be done correctly, as all of us have said, for it to be implemented correctly. I think that is the key for RIC to succeed.
Got it. So Tom, from an IP infusion standpoint, I think it's more about scale because obviously, RIC and backhaul is two different areas or domains. So how do you address scale from a backhaul standpoint, if that's your punchline?
If I can, I would just say it's really all about the platform. Giving a software platform that you can customize, that you can port to various hardware, that you can source from various manufacturers, that you can use with various operating environments or network management platforms. A true network platform. This is what the Web 2.0 people have done. This is what the operators should now be doing. That's what we're all about, and we think that's what scale is. And the last thing I'll say is that it's been great to be a part of this panel. The challenges in India, are the very same ones that we're seeing around the world. They're just kind of supersized. And the success that we're having in India certainly sets us up for success all over the world. If we can solve some of these problems around TCO, flexibility, scale, interoperability, these problems perhaps are less challenging in other parts of the world, and I think the future is really, really bright for disaggregation.
Excellent. So Ranga, your punchline.
Absolutely. So RIC, we see that as an evolution of SON. We saw yesterday in some of the sessions that RIC is addressing two major problems that SON has not addressed, that is self-healing and self-optimization. It may not exist in the same form as it is today, but we believe in RIC as a concept. We believed in a couple of years ago, started investing significantly. We have built a couple of very interesting use cases, applications that are demonstrated in every Plugfest. They are there in our booth. We will welcome you all to have a look at that. So going forward, RIC will evolve. There is a need to have a developer community to build those use cases. There could be hundreds of such use cases, and we'll stay invested.
Excellent, excellent. So thanks to all the panelists, I think, for all the insights. It's been a very exciting session. So now back to food. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So with this, we'll just start off our last panel. We are running a little behind schedule, but so we'll quickly start this off. So I'd request to call our fellow panelist, Jonathan from Eyebrows. Please welcome on the stage. Bhuvnesh Sachdeva, Senior Vice President, Product Management from HFCL. Chetan Hebale from Meta and Connectivity Technologies and Ecosystems Manager. And TT from EdgeCore, Vice President, EdgeCore Networks. Welcome. Is my mic is running, okay. That's okay. I mean, yeah. So, first of all, apologies. I think we, since the morning, we've been running a little behind schedule. And thanks a lot for being here, all of you. So for the sake of time, very quickly, I'll start, Jonathan, from your side. Why don't you introduce us with what Eyebrows does and about your business activities and how important is Wi-Fi, playing a role in your networks?
Sure, thank you. First of all, we are a French service provider, and we provide services to hotels. We're very specialized. And I'm delighted to be invited and honored to be invited to talk about India. I think the scope of my involvement here is to talk about demand side. And clearly we look at India and we say potential partners to work with and suppliers to work with. Obviously we have no pretensions whatsoever to talk about the Indian market itself. So in terms of what we do for these hotel customers in Europe, we are primarily a telco, so we provide circuits, we provide MPLS networks, private WANs, linking all the sites together, telephony, and we've always had this sort of add-on on the end, which is called guest Wi-Fi. It's been one of those extra services we provide, and in the past, it's been one of those kind of best efforts services. And it made sense for it to be best efforts because it wasn't very good. It was operating over copper circuits, and there was always a performance bandwidth hit. You may have, 50, 100 users there. When they're all trying to access the internet over a little DSL line, it doesn't work very well. So there's been a kind of general acceptance that the Wi-Fi was just not very good. That has changed. That's been changing over the last 5 years. But progressively, all the customers are migrating over to fibers. They're not all there yet, but most of them are there. And when you've got gigabit arriving at the property, it becomes a bit hard to saturate that gigabit from your Wi-Fi traffic because the Wi-Fi is not good enough. And so we're facing this need now, which is to upgrade massively the Wi-Fi on these properties so that they can use, well, maybe not all of the gigabit, but they can actually get a decent performance out of it. And the last 5 meters, 10 meters, 30 meters is no longer the bottleneck. So Wi-Fi has become quite critical now. And the challenge that we're facing today is that while the expectation is improved, our customers' budgets have not gone up. So we're facing that challenge that says we need more access points. We need to make smaller cells. That's fine, but we don't have double or triple the budget to do it. That's where Open Wi-Fi comes in. That's where we're looking at Open Wi-Fi and we're saying, okay, there is scope to do many more access points, well, more access points for essentially the same budget and deliver a better quality service. Did I answer your question?
Yes, you totally did, and obviously we do have more questions for you. But switching over to Chetan, and there's a particular reason I want to go in that order. So you represent Meta on the panel, and can you explain what has been Meta's role and why primarily you have been involved in the open Wi-Fi from the early days, and what are the the advantages that it brings in shaping up the Wi-Fi, the Wi-Fi solutions for the industry on the whole?
Thank you, Sandeep. So and I see a lot of familiar faces, a lot of new people who've joined the Open Wi-Fi organization. So maybe I'll take a step back and very briefly, for those who are new, sort of talk about what Open Wi-Fi is and its genesis. We're at a conference that clearly a lot of us have known, is very dominated by operators, people very familiar with 3GPP. And I always like to say that in this Open Wi-Fi journey, we're actually following 3GPP's lead by about 30 years behind, right? In 1990s, GSMA separated the components. You could go buy, a Siemens base station and have it work with a Cisco core. Fast forward, that model is well established in the cellular industry. So in the Wi-Fi industry, unfortunately or fortunately, we've got very vertical stacked solutions, all the way from the hardware to the software to the analytics layers. And so and that's good because it's a vertically integrated model. There's one person sort of qualifying the entire network. But one of the downsides of that model is you can't expand. You often get constrained by one vendor.
Yeah.
And service providers have been sort of giving this feedback for a while. And we as Meta have, our vested interest really lies that in improving the state of connectivity by having more ubiquitous network, our applications and the industry's applications run, can reach a lot more people. So that value proposition is pretty simple. So we really took this leaf out of the way 3GPP did it, and Open Wi-Fi essentially separated these different components that otherwise were vertically integrated in the network, but we went 2 steps beyond that. So one step, we separated the software from the hardware, so there's a software disaggregation. And then the second one is we actually built some of that software that is common across literally every vendor in open source. So if you sort of compare that, if you're very familiar with Open RAN discussion that just happened, in a sense, we've built the commodity aspects of that solution. So people, vendors like EdgeCore or HFCL or others can layer that software on top of it and get to market faster, better, right? And then we leave the economics to the vendors and to the demand. So we let the market decide the economics. We're interested in bringing choice, accelerated R&D features. So you get faster solutions coming at the speed of Wi-Fi, as I like to call it.
So I was having a chat with one of the demand operators yesterday, and I was pleasantly happy to hear these words, and I will quote those exact words, that one of the biggest game changers that TIP has given to the industry is Open Wi-Fi, because it has suddenly helped in making the time to market of the Open Wi-Fi sort of branded solutions and products much faster than ever before, and especially in these times of chipset shortages and the supply chain problems. I think it's great to hear such things coming out of commercial adopters, right? So from that, moving on to Bhuvnesh, HFCL. So we have 2 sort of supply ecosystem partners sitting in. One purely Indian, going all over the world. One purely global, coming into India to address the market, which is EdgeCore, right? So starting with you, you've been making big bets across the globe. We've seen you, in every sort of domain, whether it's Europe, whether it's South America, North America, subcontinent, Sri Lanka. So how has Open Wi-Fi helped you in, in terms of expanding this supply to the rest of the world for HFCL?
So many factors that come in play here. One, we started as a small OEM, being part of a very large system integration group within India. We started as a very small group within them and started as an OEM. Developing Wi-Fi, we got initial good success within our home base, home country, and did deploy a lot of equipment there. And it has succeeded fairly well, and we continue to get the demand. But moving out of the country, and especially in new markets where all the incumbents or all the big players are already established, establishing ourselves or even getting an entry into their networks or even for a POC was a challenge. They always would have a doubt factor involved, why I should look at a new vendor. And tying up with Open Wi-Fi, that gave us this confidence that now backed up by Open Wi-Fi or backed up by TIP and Meta, the end customers or the operators who are really deploying, they get this confidence that they have a strong backing behind them. So at least we could get into many trials across the world. And of course, after that, you have to prove yourself, your equipment has to work. What Open Wi-Fi helped me in doing is we were able to establish a lot of trials across many customers in different geographies. Once we went through the trial, it was not just that we are on our own. TIP Open Wi-Fi helped us do the software for our products and then helped us integrate with the different controllers in the industry, so that it was really a modular kind of a network that we created for many of our customers, and they were really happy to see it working just like magic. One of the important factors we were just discussing from the previous panel is why we even needed to discuss the TCO for ORAN. Because what customers feel is that the savings that we made in software and hardware, most of this got shifted into system integration, because now the software and hardware integration is required, and you need to have system integration services, which some of the savings have shifted there. And we are talking about savings over time, how we will be able to automate it, reduce OPEX and all. Slight change here in Open Wi-Fi. You do not require any system integration services. The way it has been platformed is so simple that it just works. You do not require anything. The box goes from a supplier. Most of the times it goes with the software integrated. Even if it is not, customer has an option just to download the software from the website and just port it onto the hardware, and it just works. You do not have to do any integration activity with the controller if you are using a third party. You do not require to have any software integration or any of the effort that is required to tweak to make it work. It is just not required. You just plug it in and it works. And it works like a charm, and people are so happy using it that now we have saved on the hardware and software. We have not diverted these savings towards system integration. And now we are not locked to any of the vendors. You have a choice. And to answer your question, you have a choice to buy the hardware to suit your requirements. You do not have to buy the highest of the end of the hardware from one vendor. You can choose depending on the requirement where you need to deploy, depending on the paying capability of the customer, depending on how many users you want to serve. You can actually choose the hardware from the market, from the very low end to very high end. Same software works on all of them, and they all get controlled by the same controller. You do not have to worry about integration activity, and that helps save the cost for the end customer, and that helps provide services across all kinds of markets without having to multiply their capex in many folds.
Thank you, Bhuvnesh. So moving on to TT. So, as I mentioned, EdgeCore was actually the first open Wi-Fi, adopter from a technology standpoint. And now we see you've just, you made news in terms of setting up an entity in India and making big moves in India. So how is it for a global technology player like EdgeCore to use open Wi-Fi to, capitalize on the demands that come out of India? So, we heard Bhuvnesh from going from India to the world. You're coming from the world to India. So how does that work for you?
Okay. I think we have seen a customer use the open Wi-Fi deploy in a very creative way. To enter market as India, as an outside vendor, we think it's important to create partnership inside India. So open Wi-Fi provides the opportunity to do that with the openness.
Yeah.
Actually, EdgeCore built in like a solution platform from the AP to the cloud control. We open every interface. So I'll give you an example. We have a partner company in India called Apricom. Apricom is specialized in AI-based Wi-Fi, and they are providing wireless QoE service to customer for the enterprise, small business, and the ISP. We work with them together, and within 3 months, they integrate the solution into our solution. So we have integrated their solution into our AP and our cloud controller. Without the openness, I think it will take a much longer time based on our previous experience with other partners. So I think from EdgeCore point of view, it's important to build a partnership locally. So we've been able to market the solution together. So not to repeat the benefit provided by open Wi-Fi, provided by other speakers, we just share the experience with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, TT. So moving back to Jonathan. So, you've already trialed open Wi-Fi. There are, movements happening from open Wi-Fi from a commercial standpoint. So what were the challenges particularly that, that open Wi-Fi started solving for you? And, you started moving from, what the traditional solutions that you used to use and now moving towards, commercial adoption of open Wi-Fi. How has that journey looked like for you and your company?
I think I've hinted at one of the responses, but it's not the only one.
Yeah.
Clearly, one of them is cost. A cost per access point, which enables us to take a customer's budget and deliver a much better experience. And yes, we've done some piloting, and it took us a bit of time to get access points installed and firmware there and to tweak them. But after that, we haven't heard a word from the pilot sites other than everything's going smoothly, no issues. It's nice to get that kind of non-feedback. It's usually the best we get, is the non-feedback. That's usually a sign of success. But it's not the only motivation. And you were hinting a few minutes ago that there is a kind of pain factor involved in integrating your operational support systems with vendor A, vendor B, vendor C, vendor D. Oh, we have to go back, they've changed vendor A. Oh, vendor C has changed. You kind of feel like you're dancing on a table which is not solid at all. It's constant maintenance. And if you're lucky, you finish, but sometimes you don't finish. It just never stops. And so this notion of not just a single system, you know, the open Wi-Fi single controller, it's nice that it's a single system, but it's also nice to us that it's got modern APIs there, that it's got telemetry that's coming out not in some weird, far-faluted thing you have to work on. It's in Kafka.
Yeah.
It's just lots of things you don't have to reinvent. It just means that you can stick on the extra business logic you need without doing lots of integration work. You just consume the Kafka topics, that's all. That kind of feeds into another theme for us, which is, okay, all these access points, they're generating huge amounts of data. And when you look at the vendor controllers, they all give you lots of graphs. You can click on this access point and this SSID, and you can drill down to see lots of things. But I haven't yet met the network engineer who is motivated to drill down. Drill on this access point and this access point, and there's thousands of them. Where do you stop? And at a certain point, you want some intelligence, some filtering taking place that says, show me what's broken. Show me what I need to pay attention to. But I don't want to have to go and look for it. And I think that's the challenge operation that you face today, that the systems don't really tell you. They give you lots of logging data, lots of graphs to look at, but not this simple story that says what's broken. In this day and age, we've all suffered from supply chain problems. And when you've kind of built your system on one vendor, or two vendors, or three vendors, those three vendors are not necessarily interchangeable. It was one vendor where they were good because it had this form factor, a different vendor had a different form factor. You can't necessarily chop and change your vendors as a function of what's available. So it's kind of reassuring to have, there are several vendors that you can pick for their environmental constraints, their size factors, their form factors, but ultimately they're all going to work on the same software stack. And that's a big motivator. And I feel quite reassured in discussions today with at least two gentlemen on this platform that they're thinking the same way. Delivery times of, some vendors can do it in 3 months, some can do it in 12 months. It's, you guys are expecting to deliver in shorter timeframes, and that's really good.
Thank you for your inputs, Jonathan. So, for the sake of time and considering the main stage sessions have started, I'll wrap it up with one question each on the future of Wi-Fi. So, Chetan, starting from you, we keep hearing, all these, not hearing, but everyone realizes the new user experiences and the use cases, which are developing and coming to the market faster than expected. So what do you think is your opinion on, the role Wi-Fi is going to play in the networks of future?
So I think, if anybody, as many of you who've already been in this industry, Wi-Fi tends to be, come out at a much faster rate than most technologies.
Yes.
And it's a very hazardous occupation trying to predict what Wi-Fi will do next. But I'll take the challenge a little bit. I think where we see that is, it'll obviously continue to evolve to faster, better. But I think one of the challenges that Wi-Fi hasn't solved, and I think there are two domains from an industry standpoint. One is the onboarding experience to Wi-Fi. That continues to remain one of the biggest bottlenecks when you go beyond dedicated enterprise networks. And I think the industry should take that up. The second one is sort of it's both the advantage of Wi-Fi as well as the very advantageous causes its disadvantage. And that's the best effort nature of Wi-Fi. That's what makes Wi-Fi so easy to deploy, but also makes it very unpredictable. You know, you go on a Monday morning at 8 o'clock, it looks beautiful. 8:10, the train arrives and the network goes to hell, right? So is there a way people should be thinking about Wi-Fi? Are there things that we should be doing that maybe assure baseline SLAs? And for us as Meta, that's also important. We're obviously not thinking of the train station. We're thinking of the consumer or the enterprise use cases of the metaverse, where we want more quality of experience, consistency, predictability over a medium that's inherently, you know, best effort. So I think I'll leave it at that philosophical level without suggesting any solution. And maybe as a plug for Open Wi-Fi, I'd say the power of Open Wi-Fi is not just in disaggregation, which is where the foundation is today. But tomorrow, if you want to solve this problem, it doesn't require one company to do it. Maybe the community comes together and figures out how to share common aspects and how to preserve differentiation in solving that problem. So I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Chetan. So, Bhuvnesh, you know, recently at you know, one of the regional conferences, India Mobile Congress, HFCL launched with a bang, you know, like your latest Wi-Fi 7 open source access point. So, what could you address? I mean, obviously, you know, launching that in India and you know, trying to solve some of the network requirements of the future. What was the real, you know, aspects that you feel this is going to help in terms of achieving from an HFCL Open Wi-Fi access point portfolio?
Yeah. So one launching Wi-Fi 7 in India in India Mobile Congress was one of the biggest motivation factor there was we wanted to showcase to the world that India is no longer a consuming country. We are now trying to lead the pack in terms of technology. The other thing that was very interesting that we did, and many people don't know about it, is this was the fastest ever developed product in our entire portfolio. We took start to launching the product for a commercial shipment in just 5 months. And I give all the credit to Open Wi-Fi because the base software that we use was Open Wi-Fi 2.6. Although it was not ready for Wi-Fi 7, we did a lot of tweakings, but we did not have to do the software from scratch. And we could just come out with the performance that people would look forward to. One access point and one station. We were able to link up a multi-link operation we could show based on 2.6 only. And we were able to achieve 10 gigabit of capacity. One station, one access point, which I don't believe anyone has showcased in the world in a bigger platform than what we did in IMC. Another important point that I want to highlight here is, just like eyebrows, we came across one of the customers who wanted to have a different form factor for wall plate AP for hospitality, solving some of the problems, one of which was heat dissipation. And they wanted to deploy it in particular factors so that heat does not become a challenge. Again, we did not have to worry about developing the software once again. We just repackaged one of our existing access points without worrying about working on the software at all. And we came out within 3 months a new form factor, which we are shipping now, and it just runs Open Wi-Fi. And one of the large MSPs in Europe, they are going to trial it out this December in their live network. And they are confident that with the demos that we have given to them on our existing products with Open Wi-Fi, they are confident that they'll be able to deploy it in what they're looking for. So all in all, what Open Wi-Fi is helping us is much faster time to market than it used to be once we were doing everything by ourselves.
Thanks, Bhuvnesh. So TT, coming with the last question. So as we mentioned, you've been the first adopter of Open Wi-Fi, and you've seen the journey, you know, from a global lens, right? I mean, the requirements starting from Wi-Fi 5 or going to Wi-Fi 6. So what, according to EdgeCore and you, is the future of Open Wi-Fi in EdgeCore's portfolio for the future use cases that we've been talking about?
Yeah, we still continue follow that, build OpenWire as a platform, solution platform. So we see in addition to function as an access network, probably the most important as a media, we also want to see this access point be like a local hub of the application integration. So each edge called OpenWire APO with built-in Bluetooth and ZigBee interface. We want to see, and we continue want to invest to see the APO to be the local IoT control and automation media. Thank you.
Thank you, TT. And with this, we would like to conclude. Yeah, as you can see, most of the people have moved from lunch to the main stage. So once again, thanks a lot for your time and for making it to Fyuz. And very happy to see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.